United Nations' chief, Antonio Guterres, has slammed Israel's decision to pass a law banning the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees from operating in the country. Now, he says the move is unacceptable and could have devastating consequences for Palestinian refugees. Israeli lawmakers also voted to sever ties with the agency, also known as UNRWA, and designate it as a terror organization. Israel's actions have drawn widespread disapproval from several Western nations, including from its closest ally, the US, as well as the UK and Germany. And for more on this, we now speak to Ritesh Shah, Senior Lecturer in Education and Social Work at the University of Auckland. Ritesh, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, you see, the move marks a new law in relations between Israel and UNRWA. The ban doesn't take effect immediately. So what happens next?
Well, in terms of what happens next, I think we're in a bit of a wait and see period. As you noted, there has been widespread condemnation from several nations around this decision. There was also a letter sent by several foreign ministers preceding this decision on Sunday, including governments of Australia, the UK, Canada, Germany, some of the biggest donors to UNRWA, saying that basically UNRWA serves a life-saving function for millions of Palestinians across the region. I think now the question is, will international pressure put enough of a point onto the Israeli government to kind of walk back from this decision? And this is what we now need to wait and see.
Well, speaking of the pressure and the challenges it's facing, Gaza is already receiving bare minimum in terms of humanitarian aid. Perhaps you could unpack for us the implications of this move on a humanitarian scale.
Absolutely. In fact, I was just speaking to some colleagues from UNRWA last week. Already UNRWA's ability to work in the north of Gaza, which is where the Israeli government is now, or the Israeli military is carrying out its most active operations at present, it has already been quite limited. And this has been a situation of concern, which has led the United States, for instance, to say that unless Israel is able to let growing amounts of humanitarian aid into the north of Gaza specifically, they may need to halt some of their military support. And they've been given until the end of this month to do so. But even before that, and even in other parts of the Gaza Strip, UNRWA is the main provider of humanitarian assistance and has been prior to October 7th and since October 7th. It's important to keep in mind that around 1.4 million of the residents in Gaza are officially registered under UNRWA, and that means that they receive education, healthcare, fuel, food supplies from UNRWA on a regular basis. And so this decision and the ability of the Israeli authorities to effectively halt UNRWA from delivering aid to that 1.4 million people in Gaza could be absolutely devastating.
Well, absolutely. I think, as you've rightfully pointed out, and as UNRWA's chief, Felipe Lazzarini, has really slammed the decision. He said nothing less than a collective punishment of Palestinians. My question to you really is Israel really punishing the people, or is it sending a message? And if so, to whom?
I think it's a longer standing message, I think, that the Israeli government has been trying to send, specifically around UNRWA. This kind of assault on UNRWA that we're seeing now is not new. It hasn't come out of the blue. Israel has long challenged the mandate and function of UNRWA, specifically in West Bank and Gaza, keeping in mind that UNRWA was set up as a temporary solution in 1949 to effectively provide humanitarian assistance and development support to the Palestinians until a durable solution to the displacement caused in 1948 and in 1967 could be reached. unfortunately, we have not yet landed on a durable solution. And in fact, I think that part of what we're seeing now is a kind of open acknowledgement or statement by the Israeli government that effectively any hope of a two-state solution is dead. They're saying we no longer want to seek a durable solution that will allow for the viability of Palestinian statehood, of Palestinian identity and sovereignty. And effectively, we are ceding these lands as our own, and by de facto, creating a one-state solution only.
Well, Ritesh, UNRWA just last month released a report saying the ongoing war in Gaza will set back children and young people's education by up to 5 years. Just prior to this question, you mentioned that UNRWA was particularly set up and it is providing education. It is really, building children and their life, their future. How can this ban make this worse for the children?
In many ways. I mean, as I said already, UNRWA is the main provider of education to the majority of the population of Gaza Strip, in addition to around 800, there are about 800,000 Palestinians who are registered with UNRWA in West Bank and East Jerusalem. Now, at least half of these are children, and these children are under the remit of UNRWA. Now, if UNRWA is no longer able to provide these services, it means it leaves a question of who will. The Israeli government has also had an assault on the Palestinian Authority. It has systematically not handed over tax payments, which are collected on behalf of the Palestinian Authority, and that has meant that the Palestinian Authority has been really limited in the education services it can provide. So, for instance, we know that prior to the current escalation, while UNRWA was able to offer education 5 days a week to all children in West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinian Authority was only able to do half-time school because they couldn't pay teacher salaries, because they didn't have the budget received from the Israeli authorities. So I think it effectively means in the long term that in addition to the fact that children have been out of school now for over a year in Gaza Strip because of the conflict, that after the war, when and if it ends, children could be staring down the face of possibly years of not having any sort of access to education.
Well, Ritesh, thank you so much for speaking to us and providing us with all this information. That was Ritesh Shah, Senior Lecturer in Education and Social Work at the University of Auckland. South African lawyers have submitted a dossier of evidence to the International Court of Justice, maintaining accusations of Israel committing genocidal acts in Gaza. Lawyers have cited accounts from both Israeli officials and citizens as evidence, and this includes public statements made at an Israeli government conference last week discussing the possibility of rebuilding Jewish settlements in the besieged enclave. This marks the first time genocide allegations are being presented to an international tribunal as attacks continue in real time. Historically, such allegations and legal actions have been retrospective, as evidence emerged much later and in fragments. The case was first brought to the ICJ against Israel in December last year. South Africa accused Israel of violating the 1948 UN Genocide Convention, which it is party to. And the ICJ then issued an advisory ruling in July saying that Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territories are illegal.